She is a disability specialist at Butler University. Before joining the Butler team, Carly worked as a specialist for West Central Indiana Special Services Cooperative and was a behavior consultant or behavior clinician for people on the Medicaid waiver. Carly also taught resource and life skills special education. Carly's area of interest are functional behavior assessments, behavior interventions, and creating structure and routine conducive to growing and learning. Carly, go ahead and get started.
Thanks so much, Melissa. And thank you all for joining me. I know that, lunchtime is really valuable. So I appreciate you choosing to use your time to join me for this conversation. Today, I will be discussing what's the function or how maladaptive behavior communicates needs and desires. There's probably some words here that would be helpful for me to define before even getting started. First, function. Function, what does that mean? Well, it just means what is its purpose, which we'll go into a little more later. And then maladaptive, that sounds like a super fancy word, right? In this case, maladaptive just means something that could be considered unsafe or socially inappropriate. So this probably has you all thinking, right? Oh, let me see if I can, there we go. Oh, okay, socially inappropriate or unsafe. I can tell you all about that kind of behavior. They scream, they yell, they kick, they run, they hide, they cry, maybe they fall down, they're stomping, they're biting themselves, they're grabbing their siblings. I can tell you all about it. Why do I need to know the function? Great question. Well, again, our function identifies the purpose. What is the behavior attempting to communicate? All behavior communicates something, right? It can express a need or a desire, and by communicating, we get that need and desire met oftentimes. Maladaptive behavior serves the same function. And if we can understand the function of the behavior or what it's attempting to communicate, we can come up with replacement behaviors that we'd like to see. So what do we want to see instead? And then we first change our behavior to then see the behavior change in our children. So behavior change in our children starts in a behavior change in us. All right, let's dive a little more into that idea, shall we? I took this, it's a conflict cycle model. It is from the Functions of Aggressive Behavior, Implications for Interventions, which was in the Journal of Psychological and Educational Research. It was written by Iona Darjan and her team. It really dives into the functions of aggressive behaviors, but it also goes into kind of an educational neuroscience perspective. So if you're interested in those types of things, I really encourage you to read this. But if you're still joining me, I'm just learning the basics, Carly. Thanks for joining us. You're in the right place. To kind of go through what we look at when we see a maladaptive behavior process or model, I'm going to get out my handy dandy little tools real quick. So we can see here, this is the stressful event. So this is something that may cause the child through their thought and cognition to feel some feelings, maybe frustration, anger, maybe they're scared or intimidated, which then leads to an observable behavior. So those behaviors that we're talking about, maybe they yell or cry. Maybe they attempt to leave the area because this is too hard and I can't handle it anymore. When we see these observable behaviors, we often provide a reaction of some kind. Now, it's very helpful for us to stop and understand that the stressful event and the child's feelings may not make sense to us, right? Sometimes past experiences, especially past traumas, can lead a student to find something intimidating or scary, and that fight or flight. They can feel that for things that like we wouldn't perceive as dangerous or as unsafe or too challenging or intimidating, okay? So that is something to keep in mind. But also over here, let me clear this real quick. Clear my drawing. Over here, this is so important for us to remember. And I can either be really obnoxious and repeat it every single slide, or we can talk about it now. Emotional reactions that we have as the adults can escalate the conflict, which can then lead the child to experience a new, it won't seem that way because the child could still be showing that observable behavior, but it's considered a new stressful event that then continues that cycle again. So it is so important when we're interacting with our child, when they're dysregulated or when they're showing that maladaptive, socially inappropriate or dangerous behavior, that we maintain a rational, as calm as possible reaction so that we don't re-trigger the stressful event and the behavior again. So our reactions, again, can become those stressful events. So they can perceive our reaction as, oh no, I'm actually right, this is scary. Or they could see it as, oh no, now I'm in trouble or what have you. So keeping in mind, each time we move through the function, I am going to assume that we are going to keep this rational, calm state of mind and presentation when working with our children so that we can prevent that stressful event from reoccurring and the cycle to keep going. All right. So we're going to talk about the 5 major functions. There are more, and especially when you dive deeper into some of the other functions and kind of the neuroscience behind it, you might find additional. But these are ones that I think are very easy to identify and also easy to come up with replacement behaviors and to just notice in your child. So the first is attention, the second is escape, the third is access to desired activities, or it could be toys, items, sensory input, and pain attenuation. So those are the 5 that I'll be discussing with you today. So I said that all behavior can communicate a purpose, right? We have adaptive behaviors, or we have behaviors that are socially appropriate that meet our needs. For example, I was a dancer growing up. I loved attention, and I found that I could find attention by singing or dancing on stage, right? I could perform, and I'm the center of the world, and I get to have everyone's attention on me. But that is something that's socially appropriate, right? When we're singing on a stage, everyone knows that they're coming for the purpose of watching the performer. There's the maladaptive side of attention, though, and you can probably think of some in your children, such as shouting at you while you're on the phone. So your child wants your attention, you're giving attention to someone or something else, and they're going to yell or use an inappropriate behavior to get your attention. What do you do? Well, some strategies that I recommend are using attention with intention, right? They're asking for your attention. So by giving it to them, you're reinforcing it. So if every time they yell at you, you turn and look at them and respond, you're kind of teaching them that it's okay to yell because that's what's going to get their attention. So it's important for us to focus on those replacement behaviors or the positive behavior that we want to see. And also to ignore the obvious attention-seeking behaviors, as long as they're safe. When a child is self-harming or throwing themselves down, I understand we have to make sure that they're safe. But if they're just annoying, we can ignore those. So I found this fun visual that I thought would be great to share with you all that kind of explains this attention with intention or the planned ignoring strategy a little bit better. So we can see that this mom has selected the behavior that she wants to decrease. She does not want her kid to throw a tantrum on the floor anymore. She selects the type of ignoring, so she's just gonna walk by. So if her child is engaging in this behavior, she's just not going to attend to it. She's not going to look at it. She's not gonna stop and watch, but she is going to pay very close attention. She's going to really sit down and be with her child when they're showing the replacement behavior, that positive behavior that's coming. I'm gonna assume that this mom is also praising her child a lot. So, wow, you did such a great job, doing this, doing that, right? And she's being very specific about it. She also looks excited. So she's doing it in a way that also excites the child. And if they want attention and they learn that they can get it in positive ways, we're going to repeat those behaviors, the replacement behaviors, because they know it gets them what they need, attention, in a fun, positive way. When you have a child who's had like a major life change, this could be something, maybe like a new baby, or it could be like a divorce in the family. It may also just be a transition, like, moving from home to daycare or from daycare to school. That can be time when attention shifts. So thinking of a new baby, Maybe the child was an only child before and they were used to receiving all their parents' attention. And now all of a sudden there's this new person who's taking attention away. That can lead to more attention-seeking behaviors. That might be when we use our front loading of attention. Again, using that attention with intention, planning time to sit with your child, to listen to them, to talk to them, to read to them, to give them the attention that they're desiring. They'll then know, they'll feel heard, they'll feel like they've had the time that they need with you. And it's kind of like a sponge, right? A dry sponge is maybe the child that hasn't received enough attention. So they're going to seek water wherever they can find it, any drop. And that might lead to the inappropriate maladaptive behavior. But if you are giving very intentional time to your child, it's like wetting the sponge, right? Putting it in a bowl full of water. It sucks up all that water and it doesn't need to seek out anymore. It feels full. The next function of the behavior might be escape. So an adaptive example of this might be running away from a bear, right? If you're at a campground and a bear comes and to get into your picnic basket, you're not going to sit there, right? Excuse me, you're going to escape the area because that's what's safe. But our children who might perceive things in that fight or flight or have the low threshold is how I would like to refer to it, for things that are challenging, maybe their first thought is, oh, I need to escape. I can't handle this. This is too hard. In order to address that function, right, they're trying to tell you, I can't do this. I need to leave. We can chunk our task into smaller parts, right? We can hear them. Okay, this feels big. This feels scary. Let's break it into smaller parts. So if we look over at this side, the do your chores. Do your chores is really big, right? But we can break it up into smaller tasks. Like I love the clean the room example. We've not only broken it into 3 tasks of finish homework, clean your room, and then I apologize, I can't leave you, wash dishes. And we could still break up wash dishes into individual tasks too. But let's look at clean your room. Clean my room might still feel really big, and I might just want to escape because I can't clean my room. There's stuff everywhere. Well, okay, maybe we start by just putting our clothes away in the closet or the hamper. Maybe we just put all of our books back on the bookshelf. We chunk it and break it into smaller parts so it's less intimidating and easier to do. It also involves the replacement behavior, right? We want them to clean their room. And if they do it one step at a time, they're going to accomplish that task. Another strategy is first then statements. This is a great way for our children to feel heard too, especially when they're experiencing those big feelings. So first, you're going to do this non-preferred task. You're going to do the thing that I have asked you to do, like clean your room. Then you get to do something that you enjoy, like watch TV or play outside. So first, my non-preferred task, then your preferred task. So I'm hearing them out and I'm saying, this isn't forever. If you can do this step, and maybe with the chunking, if my child isn't ready to complete the whole step, maybe I even break it down and I use those strategies together. So I say, first, we're gonna put our books away. Then you can take a 5-minute break outside. Then we'll come back and put our things in the closet. Then we can take a break and have a breakfast. So listening to your child, breaking it up, making it less intimidating so they don't show those escape behaviors, because running out of the classroom or running out of your home can be very dangerous. We also want to praise the early replacement behavior. You're going to hear me use praise a ton. I think it is a very effective strategy. And oftentimes we don't realize how much we go throughout our life without receiving praise and how much we value it when we receive it. So if you're looking for those replacement behaviors, praising them is a very easy way to not only help your child identify the behavior that they're supposed to be showing, but also to promote it. All right, the next function that we're going to discuss is access. Access and escape can kind of be best friends, or they can be seen together, because oftentimes your child will escape to something that they enjoy, right? Something comforting, something calming. So access may mean that the child is attempting to get something they like. Such an adaptive way might be, I'm hungry for a cookie. I'm going to ask mom if I can have a cookie. And she says yes, and I get my cookie. Hooray. Or I want this, I can't have it, so I'm going to have a tantrum. I'm going to throw myself on the floor. I'm going to scream. I'm going to bang my hands on the floor until I get what I want. Because I really want that toy. I'm trying to gain access. So some ways that we can we can address this maladaptive behavior is, again, using first then statements. We're hearing the child. We understand that there is something that you want. And sometimes you can't give them exactly what you want, but you can maybe come up with another thing that they enjoy. So at the toy store, maybe it's not a day where you can buy the toy for them, but maybe there's something at home that you can talk with them about. Like, if we can go out to the car safely, when we get home, you can watch your movie that you love. So then we're teaching, we need to leave safely. We're teaching a replacement behavior. We're not going to throw ourselves on the floor. We're not going to do what we have to do. We're going to be safe. We're going to be socially appropriate. And then we can have a preferred activity. Visual supports are the best way to communicate this, not only because it helps to give a concrete model and there's a visual piece to it. So like I can see that first I have to read the book and then I get Play-Doh in this example over here, but also it can be reciprocal. So if my child is so dysregulated or so upset that maybe they can't communicate, having those visuals there are super helpful because maybe they can't say it, but they can point to it. They can communicate their needs. So visual supports are great for all of these functions. But it can be especially great for access because it helps the child understand that, yes, you've heard what they need, you've heard what they want, and you're going to help them work to get it. And then routine, schedule, and structure. Structure is great all the time, in my opinion. When something is predictable, our brain doesn't have to think about it as much, right? So then we can give our time to other things. But also predictability helps us understand that we don't have to express maladaptive behavior to get what we want. It's going to happen during our day, right? So if I want to have Play-Doh time, and I know that after book time is Play-Doh time every day, I'm not going to show those maladaptive behaviors because I know once I read my book, I get to then go to Play-Doh, and that's consistent. I don't have to express the need. It's already being met. Consistency is also huge with this one. So this is where, structure helps, routines help us as adults and as parents because we don't have to think about it as much either, right? If we know, again, that my kid loves Play-Doh and Play-Doh's at 2 o'clock, then we don't have to plan and be intentional. And then it also helps us to be consistent because if we make promises to our children that we don't keep, then it can tell them that I have to use this maladaptive behavior to get what I want because, mom said that I could watch a movie and then we got home and I couldn't watch a movie anymore. She didn't put the movie on, or dad didn't play outside with me like he said he was going to. So now I'm going to show him maladaptive behavior. So predictability, structure is wonderful, but also make sure that you're consistent. So when you're saying something, try and follow through every time. And if you can't, it can be helpful to explain to your child why you can't that time. The next one is sensory input. So we all are sensory people, right? We have our senses. We love to smell candles or listen to music, or maybe you have your favorite sweater that you wear that just makes you feel cozy and nice on cold days like this. Well, our children, especially those on the spectrum or those with sensory processing disorder, they also have sensory needs, but sometimes they look a lot different than ours. So their senses can be heightened, and that can either lead them to seek a sensory piece, so seek maybe something that feels good, like I have some of these little wiggles in my basket. This feels really weird and good, and maybe this is helping me with my tactile sensory input. Or maybe I like to hum because humming feels good to me. Humming is calming to me. There can also be sensory avoidance. So maybe I don't like to go in the cafeteria because the smell of the cafeteria food is really overstimulating or overwhelming to me. And so I try to leave that area because I can't sit and smell the cafeteria food. It's too strong for me. So again, it's so important for us to acknowledge the sensory needs of our children, to respond rationally, and to try to listen and provide safe spaces or time and places to either get their sensory needs met or to safely escape or not avoid those overstimulating environments. So for example, going back to Play-Doh can be a really great sensory tool too. Some people love the smell of it and also the feel of it is great. So Planning opportunities for sensory stimulation. So times when you can play with Play-Doh, times when you can swing on the swing. I have an example of a body sock. That can be a really, really great sensory input piece. Swings are great for vestibular input. So a lot of children may like flip themselves upside down or spin in circles. They're seeking vestibular input. So a swing can be a great way to meet that need. Or maybe I have like a really mild scent that I put somewhere with low lighting so that, every day at 3 o'clock, right before he gets on the bus, my student can come and sit and just enjoy the nice smells and the low lighting and get their sensory needs met. I may also not take them to, I'm thinking like a Chuck E. Cheese, and that could be a very overstimulating place, right? There are people running around. There are lights that are moving really, really fast. There are sounds all over the place. There's pizza smells or food smells. That might be a place that I avoid because it could potentially be overstimulating to my child, and they might show maladaptive behavior to communicate, this is too much, this is too scary. And then again, back to that structure and routine. If our child knows that they can have time to meet their sensory needs, they can potentially build up a tolerance. So, okay, I know that at 3 o'clock I get to go and I get to my favorite place and have my sensory needs met. So I can wait. I can, sit on the reading rug. I'm thinking as a teacher, can you tell? I can sit on the reading rug and I can listen to the rest of the story because I know my sensory needs are going to be met in just a little bit. And the last function that we're going to talk about today is pain attenuation. That is something hurts. Something hurts really bad. And an adaptive way of doing that might be putting ice, right? If my elbow hurts, I've banged it up against something and I have a really bad bruise. I'm so sorry, I just realized I need to plug my computer in. I have a really bad bruise. I might put some ice on it to help me feel better. Our children I'm thinking especially on the autism spectrum, this can be one that we see a lot there. Instead of being able to ask for an ice pack, maybe instead they can't communicate that, they don't know how, so they bite themselves, because then it takes away from my pain. It brings my mind, maybe from a headache that I'm experiencing, it brings it to my finger, so I'm not just paying total attention to the pain that I'm experiencing in my head. We're all good. Thank you for that. So we want to make sure that we have ruled out any potential conditions that could be leading our child to pain. So if you're noticing that your child's acting differently, some signs to look for: hiding, hunching over, or holding something, curling up, biting themselves or hitting themselves, crying. Those are things that might it might be our child trying to communicate or tell us that they're experiencing pain. Might be helpful to go to the doctor, especially if you are financially able, have them rule out any potential medical condition. Look for those signs of discomfort, and then maybe teach some helpful ways for your child to identify pain in ways that aren't, hurting themselves or hiding. So this little visual support here I used with adults. I worked with some older patients when I was doing in-home therapy with the Medicaid waiver. And there was one woman who was experiencing a lot of pain in her teeth, but wasn't able to tell us because she didn't have the words. We couldn't understand what she was trying to say. Her vocal approximations just weren't strong enough. But when we provided this visual support, she was able to tell us that it was in her mouth. And then come to find out, when they took her to the dentist, she had a tooth that needed to be pulled. So these visual supports can be amazing, can be very, very helpful to our children, especially those who are nonverbal or who maybe have their own dialect. We may also teach gestures. So if I have a child who experiences a lot of migraines and they aren't able to communicate those, actually just, even if they could on a good day, but they're in so much pain that talking is just too hard, maybe they put their hand on their head to tell me, and then I can take them somewhere that's safe and comfortable. I teach them a gesture that's socially appropriate, easy for me to understand. They don't have to scream and cry, and I take them somewhere safe. And then vocal approximations. So if they can say, ouchie, thingy, things of that nature, pick up on those, use those. Those are functional communication, right? They're letting us know their needs and then follow through. You might also teach words like boo-boo. Those are ones that are commonly used. It's just consistency is key when you're working with those vocal approximations, especially if you're teaching them. So making sure that you use the same word to describe what hurts or how it hurts every time. So those are the 5 main functions and some strategies that I would recommend you use to address those functions and come up with some great replacement behaviors. A thing to note, though, is that context and an established relationship with your child is going to assist with determining the function of the behavior, because we can see the same maladaptive behavior serving different functions. An example of this is yelling. I had one student who loved to yell to get my attention. He'd, Miss Keiper, look at this, Miss Keiper, look at this. I had to ignore that behavior and teach a replacement one, but it was obvious that he was trying to get my attention, right? He wanted me to come over and pay attention to what he was doing. But another child may have learned, maybe in a different environment. So maybe at school, your child has learned that if they yell, they get removed from the room. So that's a really great escape function, right? A really great escape maladaptive behavior. Because I know every time I scream, like thinking about like in church, you know, every time I scream, I get out of the church sanctuary because I don't want, my parents don't want me to disrupt the church service. So the same maladaptive behavior, yelling, is serving 2 different functions for 2 different children or in different environments, different situations. So it's great to know your child, have that context, and have that established relationship. All right, so I'd love to open it up for questions. I see that the chat has been going. I can't wait to read some of those pieces. Just some helpful resources that I wanted to share with you. This first one at the top is a survey that we often use when we are filling out functional behavior assessments, and it just helps us to determine what the function is. So maybe you're like, cool, Carly, these are all great, but like my kid yells and I don't know why. Like I haven't figured out the context yet. That survey, especially if you fill it out with a clinician or with your child's school or potentially like an ABA, go to your resources, fill it out with them, and then you guys can establish some helpful tools or strategies to come up with together. But I love that survey, it's so helpful. The second one is a blog that I just used to kind of help guide the conversation, and it identifies 4 functions of behavior. It's very practical, and it just kind of, again, helps to put some context behind the functions, especially for young children. And then that last one is that conflict cycle model that I used. It comes from this functions of aggressive behaviors, implications for interventions. Fantastic article. I think that it's definitely for one if you are well versed in this and you want to dive deeper and learn more. It's definitely a great step. So this is, I would say, for those who are wanting to get deeper into this.